There we go. So, welcome everybody to the Beyond the Mic podcast. This is C. Chris Magnus, and with me today I have Kenny. How do you pronounce your last name? Is it Vaughan or Vaughn?
Vaughan.
Vaughn. Okay.
Yep.
So Kenny, I'm not sure if any of you guys would have seen his stuff online. He has a lot of posts. I discovered him on Instagram. I believe you have over 100,000 followers on Instagram,
Yes,
and
sir.
I love the style of the posts, the paper with just a short message and then something that you expand on, which, if I'm not mistaken, is generally from your book, The Right Fight: How to Live a Loving Life, which I just got for Christmas. My mom bought it for me, and planning to read it with my girlfriend soon. So yeah, and for those of you, if any of you guys follow my email list, I just made a reference to his recent podcast in my recent email, and also a note of the potential to do a podcast. So this is that podcast. Kenny, thank you for being here. Thank you for having this conversation. And I just want this to be open dialogue. It doesn't need to be, too clean cut. Like, it's just a conversation. I do that intro like
Yeah.
that, just, to establish things. But at the end of the day, it's just a conversation, and we want it to be fruitful. So,
Amen.
all right. So we were having a conversation the other day with me, you, a couple of my friends, talking about perspective. And a lot of that has really been marinating with me. Is there anything, because you mentioned the other day, you sent me a message and you said that you were still thinking about a few things the day after. Is there anything that stuck with you that you thought through more, that you
Well,
found significant?
yeah. So one of the things that came up in the conversation was we were talking, what I was trying to share was that different perspectives are incredibly important, but what we tend to want to do is like highly value everyone's perspectives. And I think the real goal is we should value people.
Right.
But I don't want you to value my perspective. I want you to value the truth. So all I mean by that, I know that can come across the wrong way sometimes, but I'm just trying to say when we get a lot of people's perspectives and we should be open to them, we want to see them. When we were talking, we said, hey,
Right.
my perspective is like I'm looking at a flashlight, and to me, it looks like a star if I was looking at the sky. But if I would get your perspective and I see it from a different angle, I immediately realize it's a flashlight, it's not a star.
Right.
And
Right.
so, the purpose of perspectives is the goal of different perspectives is to either reveal that what we thought was true is not true,
Yeah.
or to further confirm that what we believe are true actually is. And
Yes.
so one of the things I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about is the fact that when we consider other people's perspectives, sometimes because we don't want to hurt people's feelings and we think we're valuing people by doing so, we want to really value their perspectives as if their perspectives is what is the most important thing. But the truth is it's the truth that's the most important thing. So if I'm making sense here, when we're willing to listen to everyone else's perspectives, it's not that we want to highly value all those perspectives. The problem with that, if we do that, is that there's an unlimited number of perspectives on an
Yes.
unlimited number of things, and it becomes mass confusion, and you don't even know how to attempt to value all of that, all these different things. But love is not like that. Like, and the truth is not like that. The truth is very simple. That's the good news about it. And so the goal, what I've been marinating on is how do you communicate to people that they definitely do want other people's perspectives? Because what the world tends to tell us is that just don't worry about everybody else's thoughts or perspectives because it's too complicated, it's too confusing. So the world actually even says just don't care what other people think because it's mass confusion. But you don't have to enter into mass confusion to consider other people's perspectives. But when your goal is the truth, whenever you see things from everybody's perspectives, you're confirming what you believe is true, or you're beginning to realize that what you thought was true is not. So if someone's perspective is actually truth and you now think it is, you value that. But it's not that you're valuing their perspective, you're valuing the truth. Am I making sense?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's the process of critical thinking through communication, I think. And I think there's two ends to the spectrum. And tell me what you think of this, because I see, at least online with the community, sort of the, I guess, popular trending community stuff that I see on YouTube, for example. I'm not sure how familiar you would be with this, but I see on one end of the spectrum, there's, sort of that echo chamber of, I have this perspective and I'm going to surround myself with other people who share this perspective. And if they don't share this perspective, I'm offended because I identify with this perspective. And you had some valuable things to say about that, about being offended by things. And then there's the other side of the spectrum, which is, and this is something that I find important that I kind of want to ask you about, which is closing or being too open to perspectives, because it's healthy to be open to different people's opinions so that you can continue on the journey in the pursuit of truth. However, and I have a line about this in one of my songs, and the line says, I was told to keep an open mind, but just know when to close it. Now, sometimes I question my discernment. Have I left it open? And that's something that my dad told me, is keep an open mind, but know when to close it. And I think that, like, how do you draw the line between what is reasonable to be open to versus where the boundary is of, okay, well, like, I understand that that's your perspective, but I'm not really going to give any merit to that. Respectfully, I'm not going to really give any merit to that because, I just see a broader picture than that. And I see that that's not true. And and then I guess the follow-up question would be, and then how do you handle a confrontation about that? Because a lot of people might say, oh, well, you don't care. And how can you know, for example, talking about spiritual subjects, oh, well, how do you know that all religions aren't true? And it's like, for me, I'm just like, okay, like, that's just from a Christian worldview, I'm just not even open to that idea. But then they'll be like, oh, well, you haven't studied every religion. So does that make sense? Those two questions?
Yeah, it does. And so there's like 10 different things. I almost need a notepad to write down everything I want to address
Yeah,
here.
I'm sorry. I sort of
Um,
went on a bit there.
no, you're fine. But I mean, because when I'm listening to you, there's very specific things you say, and this I communicate all the time, that reveal, like, I want to say stop right there and let's adjust that, but I want you to finish your thought. So I'm
Okay.
gonna
If
take a
you want to
shot.
stop me at any time, go for it.
No,
That's
I
fine.
don't. I actually don't. I want you to finish your thought because I want to hear it all the way through. I just forget. Sometimes I forget the pieces
Right.
I want to pick up.
Me
So
too.
let me just try to pick up some of the pieces.
Sure.
Um, so first of all, when should we close? When I should be open to everyone's perspectives, but when should I no longer be open to
Mm,
someone's perspective? And the answer is whenever, and I don't think this is what you said, boundaries. That's a real sensitive subject for me, just because the world has this idea of what boundaries are that are a real big problem. They're not a solution at all. So
interesting.
I'm gonna go at that too. So um, the boundary is love. All right. In other words, if I try to come up with all these different boundaries that tell me at which point I no longer listen to you, those are limitless, and that's mass confusion. And I never know
Wow.
how to apply that everywhere and all of the time. Okay, but love and the truth are much simpler than that.
Yes.
Love is its own boundary, and one of the things that love is the truth. There's 7 things that love is. I talk about this in the book, but one of those 7 things is truth. So the point at which it's not necessarily that I would no longer listen to you or that I don't listen to your perspective anymore, but when your perspective is clearly no longer the truth, there's no value in it. And so
Ooh.
and so here's I want to
And
be so
just that
careful.
that has truth in it, and that might be a little
Yeah,
sting.
well here's all right, well here's I know where you're going with that, but listen for a second. I want to be what I was going to say is I want to be so careful with that because that sounds like I see no value in you.
Right.
And that is what offends people.
Right.
Um
Okay, that's
and
very
it's
significant.
yeah, and it's so hard to so it's so hard to say to it's it, you can't always not offend people. I mean, the
Right.
truth is sometimes offensive, and sometimes there's absolutely nothing you can do to keep from offending them except for compromise the truth, which is not love at all. So you have to stand
Right.
for the truth, and then you have a responsibility to do the best that you can to not offend people. So if someone else's perspective is clearly flawed and absolutely not true, and this is never hard to this is I've never seen it where it's really hard to know what the truth is. I've never. I mean, I'm not saying that doesn't exist, but what's really hard is when someone doesn't want the truth and you're trying to communicate with them. So back to my point is if someone's perspective is clearly not the truth, then now my responsibility in loving them, not in what I want to do, what Kenny wants to do is go, oh, there you go, you're an idiot, or there you go, you don't know what you're talking about, or forgive me for brashness, but I'm just telling you that's what I'm thinking in my head. That's what I want to do, but the problem is I have a responsibility to love you, and so then I have to go, okay, instead of doing that, I have to go, okay, now I understand why we have different perspectives. At least one reason why is because you don't believe the truth. And because I love you, because I care about you, I want you to believe the truth. So instead of just saying you're dumb and not caring whether or not I offend you, I do the best that I can to help you see why your perspective is not true. And these truths are never very difficult. They're not hard. So if someone, but how do you do that? Like, how do I address that your perspective is not true? Do I just come out and say, you don't know what you're talking about and you're wrong? I don't think so.
Right.
I think
Because
that,
then I will
yeah,
just I was just gonna say just one sentence is then the response could be, well, who are you to tell me that you know the truth and that I don't? Are you God? Right? Like
that's
that's what
exactly
I've heard
right.
before. That's what I've heard
That,
before.
yeah, and that's true, right? And the other problem with just saying you're wrong is that I'm looking from my perspective. So from my perspective, it, it is it's obvious to me that what you're saying isn't true,
Right.
but I could still be wrong. So
Right. And that's a very interesting thing.
yeah. And so if I take, and I've done this before, I take a hard stand on your perspective isn't true
Mm.
and mine is true. And instead of asking more questions, I just take my hard stand. And then as the conversation plays out, what I end up finding out was their perspective actually was true and mine wasn't. And now I feel like an idiot. I
I
made
get
a
that with
fool of
my
myself.
girlfriend all the time.
Right. Yeah. So you don't have to do any of that. You don't have to deal with any of that. You don't have to do any of that. So what you do so what I try to do now, and I think the best thing to do when I hear your perspective and it appears to me that it's clearly not true, even if I'm 100% sure that it's not true, instead
Mm.
of suggesting that it is not true, I ask you to help me understand. I say, okay,
Yeah.
the question I usually ask is why. So I say, okay, I you see it from that perspective, and that's what you think from your perspective. I won't even bring up the fact that I don't believe it's true. I just say I don't understand, and then I have a why question, sometimes for something specifically. You know, like, okay, well, help me understand why you see this way.
Right.
And when you do that, if they are onto the truth, they'll explain it. And when you hear the why, a light's going to come on that wasn't on for you before. And you're going to go, wow, thank God I didn't just pretend like I was the smartest guy in the room,
Yeah.
and make a fool of myself.
Yeah.
But and if but if they if if you're right and their perspective is not true, that's when the train kind of goes off the tracks. It's like they either don't have a good why and they can't explain it, or they just get offended and take a stand for themselves. And so, after asking why and doing the best you can for their sake to understand what they think is true,
Mm.
whether it is or it's not, and then giving them a chance to defend why they believe it's true. If their defense for why they believe it's true is foolishness, then at that point you got to say, okay, what I will do is say, okay, well, do you think that's right? I mean, whatever their argument was, that was absolutely
Yeah.
foolishness. Do you really believe that's right?
And that's a very
Instead of
elegant way to address it.
Yeah, instead of saying that was the most foolish argument I ever heard in my life,
Exactly.
that's what I'm
Exactly.
thinking. Yeah. So then I just say, okay, do you really believe that's right, or do you really believe that? And they know exactly what I'm saying, and people understand. And sometimes they're challenged. I mean, I've seen this happen where people just like you're talking about, they becoming very offended and they're done with it. But a lot of times they haven't really thought about it. They've only gone one layer deep. And
And that's
then they
okay.
go, and then yeah, and then they're like, I haven't really thought about it, but I guess it's really not right. And it's like, wow, now I have an opportunity to speak into your life that I didn't burn the bridge by the way I responded. And
Exactly.
yeah, so but if in the end the answer to our question was, when do you stop valuing a perspective, is whenever it's, at the end of that. And this is a long conversation, but this happens real quick in real life. It's just a couple questions, and
Yeah.
it unfolds very simply. It's not complicated. If it starts getting complicated, somebody's missing, or maybe both of us are missing the truth somewhere, because the truth is very, very simple, and the child can understand it. And so, but if someone does, this is the way it always is, unfortunately. Whenever you no longer need to value a specific perspective, not the person. I'm still going to value the person, but their perspective is not. I understand it now, and I know it's a lie. I know that they're going to be offended by it. And I mean, the telltale signs are they don't want to hear your argument. Anything that you argue for your perspective or what you believe is the truth is highly offensive. And from there, it usually leads to personal attacks, like you're talking about.
Right.
You think you're God, you're self-righteous, all these different things.
Right.
And so, and when it leads into all of that, you're no longer helping this person. Even
Yeah.
if you take the approach of, I love you, I'm no longer helping you. And I don't know. It's not, I don't even like saying I don't value their perspective, but it's flawed and it's not true. And if they're not open to the truth, I'm kind of at a dead end. And if I love them, I'm not. What I tend to want to do, we think loving people means, okay, your perspective is a lie, but that's okay. It's your truth. And I love you. So I'm just going to be your friend, and we just won't talk about that, or I'll pretend it's okay.
Right. Keep the peace.
Yeah, but that's not love at all.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, are you kidding me? Don't tell me you love someone if you're not going to do what's best for them.
Yeah,
If you're not,
exactly.
because it's too hard to tell them the truth. Um, so yeah, when they're stuck on what they're stuck on and they're immovable, then unfortunately, that perspective, at least you can kind of file it in. It's just simply not the truth, and there's not a lot of value in that perspective. But the goal of all perspectives, when you're saying, hey, what came out of that and marinating on, is the truth. If 10 of us have 10 different perspectives, and they're all rooted in the truth, which is rarely the case. We all have some things that are true and
Right,
some things
right.
we've seen that are not fully the truth. The conversations reveal more to us, and we're open to it, and we're not offended by it. We learn from it. When it's over with, it's not like we want to go around the room and talk about how much we value each other's perspective. It's that how much we value what we've learned, how much more we've learned about the truth itself,
Yes.
because it's the same everywhere all the time. It doesn't change.
Well, I feel like we could talk about this for so long because like the next question that I would probably follow up with is because for us, truth is it's inherent, right? Coming from a Christian background, like truth is synonymous with God, with the word of God, with ultimate reality. And so for some people, they may even be asking the question, well, why is it valuable to, or, well, I don't know. Sometimes I just like to dig and ask questions like, well, why is it valuable to seek the truth in those interactions? And then ultimately you dig, and then ultimately it has to do with an eternal spiritual reality, I believe. And I guess maybe that's more a conversation for another time. But I think
Well,
from,
I mean, you said you asked the question, so let me throw
oh,
something in there real quick.
okay.
Okay, so the reason it's important is because it's true. And the reason the truth is important is because if it's really true, your life depends on it.
Hmm.
I don't care if you're spiritual or not spiritual. I mean, if
Yeah. Even just
I mean,
basic facts
God,
about reality.
that's exactly right. Listen, I mean, God created everything, and He knows the reality of everything He created,
Yeah.
and He shares the truth with us for our sake.
Yeah.
It's like the owner's manual on your car. So you can say you don't value the truth, but if you're a car and you run on gasoline and you don't care what anybody says and you don't value the truth, it doesn't matter what you think, what you believe, how spiritual or unspiritual you are, anything else. If you put anything but gasoline in the tank, it's not going to run.
I love how
So,
simple your analogies and metaphors are.
well, it's just that's how simple the truth is, and
Yeah.
so the truth, God wants us to value the truth, um, because it's best for us. And so no one escapes the consequences of missing the truth in this life. We escape the consequences of sin and our lack of understanding of truth and our selfishness through Christ, like you're talking about. I mean, that is the free gift of salvation,
Right.
the price He paid and on our behalf. So that it's not that there wasn't a consequence; it was that we escaped it because He took it. But
Yes.
in life, I mean, God's truths are best for everyone. I guess that's one of the things in digging into this and flushing the truth out and coming to understand what love was, that has opened my eyes the most, is that everything that God says is best for everyone, and the truth is at the top of the list. And I don't care who you are, what you believe. If you ignore the truth, you're going to pay the consequences. So you don't have to value it, but you're not going to escape it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's sort of like I'm not sure if you're familiar with Jordan Peterson, but
I
that's
am.
yeah, that's basically what he says about you can't bend reality. If you try to bend
That,
reality, it's going to snap back on you. So you might escape it for, today or tomorrow or 3 years, but somewhere down the line that's going to snap back. So,
yeah.
and just yeah, and one other thing that just stuck with me even through usually like, once we get past the subject I'll forget about something, but something that still stays with me is just what you said about the boundary being love. And when that's the perspective, because at least my whole life I've heard the answer is love, and it's sort of like a cliche and the simple answer that everyone sort of writes off immediately because, well, not everybody, but I think, at least in my experience, it's been sort of common to just hear it and it goes in one ear and out the other because there's no understanding. But I think when there's true understanding of love in the depth that just barely scraping the surface of after like talking to you. Um, yeah, man. Oh my goodness, this like we could talk about this for so long, but just like in interactions and confrontations, when the perspective is love, how can I love this person? If that's really the perspective, then at least in my eyes, that sort of resolves conflict from the get-go. Because if somebody disagrees, you don't have to get defensive to try to prove them wrong. And if they're confronting you, you don't need to, again, get all defensive. It's just a genuine perspective of, I want truth. Do you want truth? If you do, let's work together. And if not, then maybe I can give you a little nugget and pray for you. But then I'm not of value to you, right? Don't cast pearls. Well, okay. I won't. I don't know if I should even finish that scripture. That's pretty blunt. But yeah, the scriptures don't cast pearls among swine. So that's not to call people swine. What it is it's a parallel saying don't bring forth something of value to people that don't recognize its value, because they're just going to throw it away.
Yeah, and I think so. Again, I'm thinking about a lot of things I want to
That
address
was
there,
pretty
but
blunt. But
yeah, but I mean, pearls before swine, I think is, and I don't know, I haven't studied this theologically, but my understanding of it is, you know, if someone absolutely has no regard for the truth whatsoever, and the truth is like a pearl. I mean, it is life giving. Although it's offensive sometimes there's nothing better for you than the truth. Um, and nothing worse for you than a lie. I mean, if you believe lies, your life is going to be a lie. If you believe truths, you're going to fight to live these truths. So it's invaluable. But there are times, you know, that I mean, whenever if you're casting pearls, casting the truth to people who despise it, it's
right.
just a waste. You know,
Yeah.
you're not helping them. And unfortunately, they're in a place. Hopefully, they can. You know, normally. But if you believe that they're absorbing any of it, and you're casting
Yes.
it in a way that gives them the best chance to absorb some of it, then I think we should share it.
Yeah, and I think that's the balance is for example, I have so many comments on a recent song, and some people saying like, you know, quote, I'm not spiritual, but like this is my experience, etc. And I'm Christian, and so my goal in responding to a comment is not to, you know, logically or cognitively change their mind, because ultimately a relationship with God is not just a mental thing. It's something that, God reveals truth to them, and that's their journey. But I might include stuff, even if that person is like, oh, hey, I believe in this. I might say, like, whether I address that thing or not, I might just, say something along the lines of God bless you, or like, if you really submit yourself to God, he will lead you and he will heal you. Because sometimes I just, as I'm replying to a comment, something just comes to me like, I don't know if it's like a sense of spiritual revelation or whatever, but it's just this inclination towards what to answer or what to reply to this person. And even if they gave hints that maybe there's walls up, maybe it's the truth that will actually bring those walls down. Or maybe if those walls don't come down immediately, maybe that little nugget of truth is the thing that comes back to them weeks later, years later. And that's that little nugget that they held on to that allowed them to maintain hope. So I think it's yeah, it's very interesting, because I think most of the people that we interact with, we can have a positive impact on. And I haven't really interacted with very many people, maybe a handful in my lifetime ever, that are really like so despising of the truth and aggressive, that it's just sort of like, okay, like, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to take a step back.
Yeah, but I mean, if you care about people and you have a responsibility to love all of them, and they, um, you don't need to argue with them and all that stuff. But I think, you should go
Also,
out of
just a
your
heads up, we
way.
got about 2.5 minutes left on this Zoom because I don't
Okay.
have premium.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, no, that's fine. So, but if you care about them and then you will, I think you should go out of your way to make sure they understand what you believe is true. Not that you want to be right. Like,
Right.
there's no value in being right. There's value in the truth, and there's
Yeah.
value in being on the side of the truth. But my goal isn't to be right. My goal is the truth. And if I think that you're missing the truth and I care about you, then I'm going to try to go out of my way to, to at least as kindly as I can. I want to make it clear that, I don't agree. We can be friends and we can be good neighbors. But I don't agree. And I think it's best for you if you thought differently, but and
Interesting.
sometimes those differences are so significant, it's hard to be friends, but there's nothing loving about pretending to be nice whenever you're ignoring some truths that are not best for someone. So if
Say
you
that one
love
more
them,
time. There's
nothing loving about what the world calls it people pleasing.
right.
People pleasing is selfishness. It's pleasing the people around you so that they'll be happy with you, so that you can get what you want from them, and whether it's
Yeah.
fulfillment or approval or whatever it is. And it's very hard. It's very difficult for me, to say, hey, like I'll wrestle. Like, how do I say this? And should I say it? And so maybe I think, you know what? Maybe I won't say it. But if I don't say it, is anybody else going to say it? And if no one says it, and they go on with everybody else saying, "Oh, I think that's awesome. Congratulations. Good for you for having that truth." But it's not true at all. They're headed for a cliff, and they will fall off of it. Like, they will not escape, having their own truth that is not true. And if I know it and I'm convinced of it and I care about them, the only reason I wouldn't tell
We're
them
gonna
is
get cut
because,
off in about 15 seconds.
yeah, only reason I wouldn't tell them is I don't want to be offended. Right. So if I love them, I got to tell them.
Beautiful. Thank you, Kenny. This is about to cut off. Thank you, everybody. Oh my gosh, this is a terrible outro, but I think this call is actually going to completely cut out. So God bless you, Kenny. I'll send you a text message.
All right.
I feel like this could go on. And yeah, this is so